For several years, Nigeria's electricity transmission and distribution capacity has remained stagnant at about 4,000 megawatts. All efforts to address the myriad of challenges in the power sectors have shown little or no results in spite of the huge funds spent and the privatization of the sector. In this special report, Arise correspondent Georgina Ndukwe Ezanyika looks at the power sector under President Tinubu and the attempts at reforming the sector.
Known as distribution companies, DISCOs, but for many Nigerians, it's still NEPA as it still rents the air every time there's power outage. For a country with a population of over 200 million people, access to constant power supply is a luxury only the rich can afford. Electricity debuted in the US 106 years after it declared independence from the UK. In Nigeria, electricity debuted in 1896 at the Ijora Power Station in Lagos. That's 64 years before Nigeria gained independence in 1960. Till date, despite all the chest beating and thumping, 127 years after electricity debuted in the world's most populous black nation, Nigeria still suffers inadequate power supply. Different administrations have attempted to tackle the problem. They sunk billions of dollars and naira into this without result. A challenge that, according to the World Bank, is estimated to have cost businesses about $29 billion yearly. The Energy Progress Report 2022, released by Tracking SDG 7, shows that Nigeria has the lowest access to electricity globally, with about 92 million out of the country's 200 million population lacking access to power. Electric power remains a major clog in the wheel of Nigeria's target to become one of the top economies in the world, with masses and business owners scampering to share a meager 4,000 megawatts load offtake in the Nigerian electricity supply industry.
Nigeria has installed capacity 13,500. The highest on paper that transmission can evacuate, it has not been tested. What transmission has boasted that they can evacuate is 8,500. But at the downstream, the DISCOs cannot take more than 5,800 megawatts. So every day on grid, you have an average of 5,000 megawatts stranded power.
So there are a lot of issues there which has to be addressed for us to really get to that potentials of fully evacuating the 13,000 megawatts from the generating stations. That is, if they're able to get it out of their stations. Then when it comes to distribution sector, that is also where the problem is multidimensional.
Several issues have bedeviled the power sector over the years, from increasing hike in tariffs, epileptic power supply, inadequate infrastructure, low access to electricity in both urban and rural areas, as well as unavailability of gas to generate power. President Olusegun Obasanjo had attempted to solve this with the privatization of the sector in 2013. This resulted in the unbundling of the state-owned electricity company, opening up the sector to private investors. However, not much impact was made in the area of increasing power supply across the country. What makes it worse is that government offices, including military and paramilitary agencies, owe billions of naira to electricity providers, making it difficult for those who invested in the sector to recoup their investment.
So if we are able to really improve on the performance of the distribution company, particularly they all sign ATC and C losses percentage that should be reduced to a minimum of 23%. What do we have now? Average losses in the system is over 45%, which means a lot cannot be accounted for.
A report released by Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project reveals that the Obasanjo administration spent over $10 billion on the National Integrated Power Project with no results. The report, published in one of the national dailies, stated that the federal government had budgeted a whopping 16 billion naira for the various reforms under Lil Imoke tenure between 2003 to 2007, but failed to generate the needed power supply. The question is why? The continual breakdown of national grid remains a significant concern among Nigerians. Data from data miners' findings show that the grid has collapsed 223 times since 2010.
Transmission is supposed to be the owner through the independent system operator or system operator that's supposed to coordinate and install all the necessary equipment to ensure that it sees when this problem arises and take mitigating measures to stop it. One of such equipment is the SCADA, that is supervisory control and data acquisition system, which is not in place.
President Bola Tinubu, in his inaugural speech, promised to prioritize the sector. The recently passed Electricity Act 2023 also seeks to promote private sector investment in the sector. It empowers states, companies, and individuals to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity in a bid to open up the sector to investors. The Minister of Power says a retreat will be convened later this year to produce a roadmap for the power sector.
Problems with the power sector is multivarious. Is multidimensional, and it cuts across the value chain. The gas companies have their issues, the generation companies have their issues, TCN has its own issues with its network, distribution companies have their major issues, while even the customers themselves, they have issues. You must understand the peculiarities of each of these issues before you can now propose or proffer solutions to it.
With the new act, what you will find is that we'll be working, from the bottom up. We're looking at, where exactly the consumers are, and then we're trying to provide the power to ensure that the consumers actually have the required power they need, especially for productive use and for their day-to-day lives.
Other measures being taken by the Tinubu administration includes exploring alternative sources of energy, especially solar power, for unserved and underserved communities in Nigeria. The Rural Electrification Agency recently commissioned Nigeria's first interconnected hybrid solar mini-grid plant in a rural community in Nasarawa State, Nigeria. Managing Director of the agency says over 100 additional communities will benefit from this public-private sector partnership aimed at providing reliable electricity to remote communities not on the national grid. What are the plans of the government concerning rural electrification, especially using solar energy?
We started deploying solar energy because it's reliable, it's safe, and it's also easier to deploy. So what it means is that if you have a community of maybe 1,000 people, you are able to provide them with a mini grid, do a distribution network within that community, and they are able to consume their power within that particular space.
However, what has happened to the licenses of distribution companies after 10 years of privatization, as well as the state of the Siemens-supported Presidential Power Initiative?
If you go to the Simens Project, we've said it before, there's a fraudulent monopoly of equipment contract. Now, why is it that they say Ukraine war? After Ukraine war, they say because of Ukraine war, they cannot deliver. But you should remember that we signed an agreement, and this is not like a free lunch, it's a loan. It's an equipment supply contract, which is a monopoly. You have the ABB, you have Siemens, you have other original equipment manufacturer. And so that equipment monopoly's supply was not subjected to international bidding.
What we have seen of recent, and I think even the Minister of Power has queried it, is just an automatic renewal of these licenses to another 5 years. So having said that, I think the Minister has done the right thing after probably investigating to see the circumstances behind such automatic renewals. Then I think the right thing will have to be done to either endorse it or look at those who are not performing, and then they review their licenses.
But there is a lease of hope for Nigerians yet to be given electricity meters. A former managing director of TCN says the federal government, in collaboration with the World Bank, will be supplying 1.2 million meters to be distributed free to Nigerians.
So putting these meters require investment, because like we're talking now, a 3-phase meter is going for 184,000 naira, which is really, the distribution companies cannot procure them en masse, but whereby you cannot wait for this pre-metering. There is also the meter as a provider, where you can pay if you have the money, and the meter will be installed to you. And the NEC has also given an order that you are not losing your money, because this money must be compensated to you in 36 months in terms of electricity charge credit.
Some experts say Nigeria must invest over $100 billion in the power sector over the next 2 decades to boost power generation. Others are advocating the establishment of regional grids in collaboration with the private sector in order to bridge the power supply deficit. Georgina Ndukwezainka, Arise News.
All right. Very good report there by Georgina. We are now joined by Kunle Kola Olubiyo, President, Nigerian Consumer Protection Network, and Dr. Sam Amadi, former chairman of Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. I mean, there's been a lot written as regards power sector. One of them recently was an article written by Ijoma Wogugu, where she talked about some of the things that the current power minister should do. But I'd like to ask you one question, sir, as a former regulator, Dr. Sam Amadi. Why is it that it works like clockwork when Egypt does deal with Simens, but Nigeria's own deal is always left hanging? That's number one question for you. And you can also take that question, Mr. Kunle Kola Olubiyo. Dr. Sam Amadi, you can go first. Olubiyo, beg your pardon.
Olubiyo,
beg your pardon.
Okay, sorry, can I get a question again? So why is it
that it works like clockwork when this same Simens does deals with Egypt as regards the power sector, but our own is always suspect?
Very good. Very good question, I think, and the answer is pretty simple. We have always believed that the answer to our problem is private sector, which is good. So you raise a good question. The same question we ask, why is it that the Nigerian police does well in UN peacekeeping? Sometimes they come first. But here in Nigeria, they don't ever do well. So the answer is in the political economy. Look, when they were privatizing, Kunle will also bear me out on this, I was seen as the bad boy because I raised questions. At a particular meeting, all the ministers, directors of Ministry of Power, BP, everybody said, remove Sam Amadi. I said, privatization requires dealing with a lot of problems to work. The private sector is great, but it relies on public sector that is first reformed and not corrupt, focused. Even projects have objective-minded. So, for example, you have a TCN. I saw the report, you're talking about the TCN. The TCN, the National Transport System for Power, is a company licensed by NEC. It's supposed to have its directors' boards well constituted. Until I left, the federal government never properly corporatized TCN. According to, in fact, the point we raised the issue about the board. So the point I'm making, the simple answer is this. Yes, you can get Simens to work here. Simens will work according to your public sector setup. There's a project management framework. They drop the equipment that you are procuring. They probably bring their experts to help guide you. But then you're going to follow your timeline for delivery. You're also going to show that you care about the outcome, not just the rents, who's going to get what. You also show that you really would put the best guys that will do that job. So that this ifs, if you do not put them, and of course these companies also understand the dark art of dealing with countries that don't want to work. They say the products, they don't have capacity to interfere with your internal affairs. They don't have capacity, or even they ought not to tell you who you should put on the table as the MD of that institution, or as the engineers who are going to oversight that function. So the critical point, I remember very well when we were with Okonjo-Iweala and the previous government, the meeting with the former British Prime Minister, he made a point, and that's what I keep saying. You can't outsource government, or you can't insource government. So if we refuse, and that Nigeria has been very bullish to refuse to reform government. I'll give another example. When I was a regulator, in a meeting with Professor Bat in Nigeria, meeting with the president, they were talking about putting 5 billion naira somewhere. And I said, sir, this is a regulated entity. What that means is that you do first prudence check. Is this investment necessary? Is it prudent financial? That's the idea of regulation. And I say, you can't just come and say, in a licensed entity that somebody regulates, it says, the minister come and bring a budget of, we need 5 billion to fix. Fix what? Pass it to the regulator first. This is what will happen in Egypt, it will happen in UK, it will happen in London. You know what happened? They agreed with me, and we finished the meeting. When that money was invested, I didn't know. They did the same thing that I said was not the proper way. So, long and short, yes, you can pretend and go to London and get Simens or get Julius Berger or get anybody to do the work. If you don't even want to run government in the most simple procedural, rule-based, competence-based, and performance-based, none will work. So it's not rocket science. It's simple. The public sector, government must first work before the private sector work.
Okay. Mr. Kunle, Kola, Olubiyo.
Thank you.
Yeah, the question I asked Dr. Sam Amadi, why is it that it's easy for Simens to work effectively in Egypt, but not in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. I align with Dr. Sam Amadi, who is now back to us on this side, for advocacy and right activism. He was on the other side. We borrowed him and he's back. Having said that, you are aware that it's a public knowledge that here in Abuja, for you, quote me, to be promoted from the rank of assistant director to deputy director, you must play the Nigerian factor. For you to be promoted from deputy director to director, there must be Nigerian factor.
What do you mean play the Nigerian factor?
I'm coming.
Explain it to me. What do you mean play the Nigerian factor?
I'm laying a background. From you to be promoted as a permanent secretary, a director to permanent secretary, there must be Nigerian factor. When you say the human element, you're talking about corruption. Now you have the PIDs that Nigerians put a caveat. Nigerians that were entrusted with public trust, they put a caveat. They work according to the dictate of foreigners. Very recently, there was a nolle prosequi issued by federal government on any case, or is it Malabo, any case in Italy. Are we saying the issues at stake are no longer there? Are we talking about saying that those incidents that led to Nigerian filing an action in court are no longer there? Is the Nigerian factor and regulatory capture. Now, the Simens Power Project did not work here because you have what we call the global best practices, like Dr. Amadi have said earlier. Simens Power Project in the first place was not negotiated by experts. You have the late chief of staff of blessed memory, who even like the former minister, Mama Saleh, like was carrying his briefcase behind him. He was the lead negotiator. And the CEO of Simens International was country representative in Nigeria. It was a monopoly equipment supply deal. It was not subjected to international global competitive index for monopoly. Now, this Simens contract, for whatever it is called, you remember that some time ago, Simens was blacklisted by FEC for shortchanging Nigeria by Federal Executive Council. So, and the same Simens, without vacating that blacklist of Simens in Egypt, Egypt was able to wrap up energy or power by additional 20 to 30,000 megawatts because they were free of all these encumbrances. If you have a sector that does not have regards for KPIs, that does not have regards for benchmark, that does not have regards for procurement procedure, whatever that is being done, go to Siemens, go to whatever. Once it comes to Nigerian environment where corruption is the language, rent seeking, then it will not work. So now, the Siemens have continued to shift the goalposts. They said Ukraine war is preventing Siemens from them producing. Now, the last time they said the chief executive of Siemens have a running stomach. The next time they will tell us now is that because the food the Siemens CEO have eaten has not digested. Meanwhile, they have not declared a force majeure. The contract is still running. The rate at which some of these equipment contracts were benchmarked in 2020 or 2019, if you look at the indices, now some of this equipment will have increased in value. Okay. So the Simens project is just what we feel that in public interest need to be reviewed. It's not in Nigeria interest, and it's a duplication of projects. There are a lot of other projects that have been set out to do the same thing that the Simens Power Project is about to do. So we need to get the best for Nigerians.
Okay. Well, first I'll make a comment. Both of you will recall that there was in 2019 what was called the Presidential Power Initiative under President Buhari. And that was the deal with Siemens in 3 phases. The projection was that under the plan, there will be up to 11,000 megawatts of electricity generated by 2023. We have not seen that. The Minister of Power says we're still at the level of 4,000. Recently, President Tinubu was in Germany for this Compact with Africa summit. And he met with Olaf Scholz, the chancellor, on the sidelines. And this Siemens AG plan was one of the subjects he discussed in terms of partnership with Germany. I noted what Olaf Scholz told our president. He said, well, you know, the power can be generated. That's not the problem. But it is up to your government to follow up. So maybe it's Nigeria that does not follow up. But that's comment, by way of comment. But let me ask you the question now. Let me start with you, Dr. Amadi. The Minister of Power recently said the Nigerian government should have done cost-reflective tariffs long ago, but that it is not politically expedient for the Buhari administration, for the Tinubu administration to do cost-reflective tariff, and that there is subsidy on electricity, like up to about 70 naira. But that if we were to do cost-reflective, we will be paying as much as 130 naira or 140 naira per kilowatt hour. Is there really that subsidy, as someone who is an expert in that industry? And then, Mr. Olubiyo, for you, I'm excited hearing that there is a Nigeria Consumer Protection Network, and you are talking about electricity so eloquently. How has your network been protecting us? Because the bills just keep going up. And how can Nigerians access your network to take up, you know, consumer protection issues? But let me start with Dr. Amadi first about the tariffs, and then you can tell us how you've been protecting us through your NGO. Dr. Amadi.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Olubiyo. First, thank you very much. So first, let me start with this. I don't think that there was the best time to do cost-reflective tariff, and that I don't think there is now a worse time. First, if you look at the fundamentals, they have not shifted much. You know, in 2013, when we started this privatization, the socio-economic conditions are pretty almost the same in terms of 3 things. One, we've had the same level of inefficiency, cost of gas, collection and commercial and technical losses have not moved differently. Income, poverty rate has not really, it's not better or much worse off. So again, the problem about cost-effective tariff is that the tariff has been moving, but probably not meeting the level of cost. Cost also escalating. Look at the Forex cost now. The Forex alone will constitute significant more than 5 to 10% of rate rider. So the structure is designed in a way that in 2 ways. One, we have what we call revenue requirement, which means that the regulator looks at all that it costs to produce X amount of power, let's say 12,000 or 10,000. Now that's a projection. It means that the more quantity you have, all things being equal, the less average cost and less marginal cost. So if we're doing 20,000 megawatts, then the unit cost will be cheaper because most of the capital cost will still be used, the same capital cost we use for more quantity. If the quantity drops, then the cost will be higher. So what happens at first? Projections. We talk about 10,000 megawatts, now we're doing only 4,000. So there's a gap in more costs. Then the DISCO would like you to remedy them in the next wave of minor review. So the minor review controls for inflation, controls for exchange rate increase, controls for cost of gas, controls for quantity. So those are indexed in arithmetical, scientific way. This is the problem. Now, when there is more than 5% plus or minus change in these indicators, there's a reindexing that means that it either go down if those plus minus 5 or 10 means there's savings, so therefore the price will go down. Now, if they are positive, meaning they increase more than 5% global aggregate change, then there should be reindexing back to what it is. Now, what the minister is saying, if you look at these escalators, if you reindex them now, you're going to have rate shock, high peak kind of rate increase, which, to be frank with him, socioeconomically, it might not, the purchasing power, look at fuel, at the same 30,000 or even 50,000 minimum wage, look at all the cost escalators or increment of prices at different levels. So yes, socioeconomically, it might not be very affordable, but look at what it is. The problem is that, two problems. One, the investors should have the capacity to borrow at long term and recover at long term. So the regulator will sculpt the tariff in a way that you have under recovery, maybe in this new 2 years, this year, next year, because the economy is not doing well. But assurance is there that you're going to have recover back those deferred payments through in the next subsequent years. But that will require that both the utility has liquidity, capacity to borrow, and that the government itself can give confidence that these deferred tariffs can be recovered. Now, we have that. That's why we did a 15-year tariff plan. But the problem in this market is financial, is that the DISCOs are under too much pressure to recover their money quick. And the government cannot allow you to expand that tariffs in a way that is not affordable. Again, every good CEO of a DISCO who knows this job will not allow you to over-increase tariff for 3 reasons. One, if you over-increase tariffs, there will be more resort to stealing power, and there will be more, technical losses, commercial collection losses. So I think that we should increase tariff, but increase in a manner, that.
Dr. Amadi, we're trying to save time because we still have one more guest. Is there a subsidy? Is the federal government subsidizing electricity? Hello, are you there?
There's a cross-subsidy, meaning some... I'm hearing you. There is a cross-subsidy. Some customers subsidize them, others. The federal government subsidy in this electricity market is actually not a direct subsidy for now. I think it's because there are debts that the federal government is carrying. The bulk trader buys from the generators, and then the debt falls back on the federal government. But the component of federal subsidy direct on tariff is less now. What we have now is more of cross-subsidy and more of debts, unrecovered costs that the bulk trader carries as a debt on behalf of the federal government, because it is the one that has indemnified the generators.
That's clear. But quickly, Mr. Olubiyo, how have you been protecting consumers, particularly in the electricity sector? Quickly, we have just about 2 minutes or so to go.
The media have been our partners in this effort. Like in this particular studio, I've had not less than 6 to 7 previous appearances and other national media spectrum. The issue of consumer advocacy or consumer right protection is germane, because the operators or service providers are stupendously rich. And even sometimes, very recently, let me use the case of Abuja. There's a place close to NAF Center they call Jahi. Customers who are on meters, there was a mismatch in their data. Their addresses were changed. They were not involved in energy debt. They were not involved in any kind of infraction, and bills were loaded into their account without their consent. And so
several cases in Magboro, there was a case in Oton, where the consumers have bought transformer and they could not install transformer for, even they built the network and they could not install it because of bureaucratic bottleneck. So there are so many issues, even with government, with the minister. I'm sure that by next week, by special grace of God, the minister is going to be your guest here. We have done that with the past minister, Mama Saleh. We scheduled for them to talk to us as Nigerians and engage the end users. But the last minister is shy away from this thing. But I'm sure Adelabo, after his return from Germany, is going to be here. Is going to be the NTA. We want them to talk to us. We want the media to ask questions so that we can all get it right. We are engaging government at different levels. So we are sure that with time, with our passion and making sure that we are insulated from contribution or financial support from government, we have the independence of opinion, and we are protecting consumer in way and manners that we cannot just enumerate in this short.
On that note, Mr. Olubiyo, we would like to thank you very much, and also thank you, Dr. Sam Amadi, for joining us on the morning show today.